Hey, somebody needs to get sighted in. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, The Professional Noticer is sponsored by WisdomHarbor.com. Hey, here are a couple of quick questions. First question, how long has the public school system in your state been repeating the mantra, more money for education? And the second question, through the years, as they've gotten more money, how much has changed? Today, families and school systems all over America are finding WisdomHarbor.com's one-of-a-kind streaming service to be the perfect, low-cost, high-quality educational tool for their students. Wisdom Harbor's stated responsibility is to create the next greatest generation, starting with your hometown and your school system. For less than $3 a month per teacher, classrooms have access to original content only found on WisdomHarbor.com that teaches, entertains, and builds character in young people while creating conversations between young people and the adults in their community. Utilizing video, audio, and the written word, content is delivered in small bites by Grammy winners, CEOs, comedians, chefs, best-selling authors, and Hall of Fame speakers. There are even guitar lessons from an award-winning songwriter. Check it out today and join your friends and neighbors who are already a part of WisdomHarbor.com. And isn't it time your schools got involved? WisdomHarbor.com, creating America's next greatest generation, starting with your hometown. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. I don't know if we're setting a record today or tying a record, but we have one of my absolute favorite guests. And I don't know if this is I think this might be the fourth or fifth time he has been our guest. I refer to him as the most interesting man in the world. And the last time he was here, we laughed for days after the conversation we had with Walt Merrell. Walt is an author. This is the fourth in this series, Shepherding Outdoors. It's the Fourth Night's Watch. It's a collection of short stories from a Southern father. And if you haven't gotten the first three, you can get the fourth one and then go back and read the first three. But you will love this book. Walt is also the district attorney of Covington County in Alabama, which gives him a lot of stories. We'll ask about that. But please welcome the most interesting man in the world, Walt Merill.
And it is so good to be here. I don't know. When you started talking, I thought I must be in the wrong place. He is not talking about me. It's interesting. People ask me all the time, "How do you do your job?" Right? Talking about being district attorney, and I got to tell you, Andy, and I think you can appreciate this more than most because you do such a good job of lifting up a room. You know, when you talk about rape and death and murder and all of those things all the time, if you're not real careful, you'll get drugged down. And I got plenty of friends, people I love dearly, that are lifelong prosecutors who they are just numb to the world.
Really?
And so people say, well, why'd you start writing? And it was almost like self-defense because all of my stories are designed to just fill your heart or make you cry or make you laugh or, whatever.
Yeah.
And so my professional world is kind of this dark place, and my hobby world, if you will, is this really light and airy place. And so, in some ways, it's like Batman and Robin. It's
right.
It's the Dark Knight and the Boy Wonder. So anyway,
that is funny. You're a husband. You're a dad to 3 daughters.
Yeah, which is.
You have a boy dog. You guys even have a...
I did. He was the best dog in the world. This kind of... You've had this dog before, and my wife made me get him neutered. It was a tragic and sad day. I heard the earthquake and the clouds thundered at the moment that the vet went snip, snip. And
oh, no.
I don't think that dog ever forgave me for that day.
I always remember a Far Side cartoon with a dog leaning out the back door. and are leaning out the back window and talking to his other dog friends, and he says, "Hey, we're going to the vet. I'm going to get tutored."
Hey, listen, my father-in-law took me and brought me home from my vasectomy.
Really?
And he said to his dying day, he said, "I'll never tell anybody the things you told me on the ride home that day." And of course,
still under anesthetic. Yeah.
Yes, I was loopy. And of course, he always knew that I didn't remember what I had said. So to his grave, he carried that remark, and I still don't know what I said to him on the way home. Yeah.
That is hilarious. So when and so I don't mean to prolong the vasectomy thing, but your daughter's names, first daughter's named
Bay.
Yeah. Second daughter's named
Cape. C-A-P-E.
Which is the edge of a bay.
That's right.
Okay. And the third one is named
Banks,
which is the end of the water.
That's right. Yes. So I wanted and you'll appreciate because you're a big music lover, and I grew up with 70s rock and roll, right? I just love 70s rock.
Me too.
So, and as much as it hurts my masculinity sometimes to admit this, I was a big Rod Stewart fan.
Okay.
And so I love the song Maggie May, and I kept telling my wife, "Hey, let's name our daughter Maggie May." And she would like politely change the subject or just kind of, sheepishly kind of, not respond. And one day I just said, "I don't understand why you're not even engaging me in this." She said, "I am not naming my daughter after a middle-aged woman who seduced a teenage boy." And I thought, well, when she says it like that, it sounds bad.
Yeah. And you're like, that's what the song is about?
That's right. Yeah. So I had to go back and listen to the words again. I was like, I'll be dog, she's right.
That is funny.
So May eventually turned into Bay. And we had no intentions of creating this nautical theme. And we really only intended to have 2 children. And so Cape kind of was easy because it fit with Bay. But
I love that.
And we also, by the way, gave them these really, kind of distinguished and formal first names. It's Olivia Bay Merrill. And Penelope Cape Merrill. And Virginia Banks Merrill. And that way, when they grow up and it's time to adult, they can have an adult name if they want to.
Yeah.
So after we got pregnant with our third child, we were not planning one. She was a blessing baby. And we joke, but we are very serious when we say my wife cried for 9 months. And she definitely had, it was a difficult pregnancy from a hormonal standpoint. And she was older, and we were already back to the point of starting our careers. And that was not the trajectory that we had. But God had a different plan, right?
Sure.
And so she started saying, "Look, you're going to get a vasectomy." And much like her response to me when I was talking about naming our first daughter Maggie May, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'll look into that." And I was like, "I got to go cut the grass," And so this went on for months. And the baby came. And it was really like I'd come home and be like, "What's for supper, honey?" And she'd be like, "You're going to get a vasectomy." And it had become like a daily topic. And so finally, one morning I'm at the office and I rang my secretary and I was like, "Hey, schedule an appointment for Andy Andrews for Wednesday morning at 10. And she laughed and she said, "You can't have any appointments Wednesday." And she hung up. And so I was like, "What?" So I called her back. I said, "What are you talking?" She said, "Call your wife." And she hung up. And so I called Hannah, and so I said, "Hey, Miss Carroll said we got something going on." She said, "Yeah, you're getting a vasectomy."
She made the appointment.
So I said, "Oh, you mean like, okay, so we're going to get the pros and the cons and, the risk of
Hear how it's done."
And she says, "No, I told him to skip all that crap. We're going to the hospital. You're getting a vasectomy." And so the surgeon was a good friend of mine. He was in my Sunday school class. And so I called him up. I was like, "What are we doing?" He said, "You're getting a vasectomy."
So she had already, it was done.
And so Banks was a rather appropriate name because that is indeed where the water ended. So
that is hilarious.
Me and my poor dog now,
that
right?
Is hilarious.
Yes.
I wonder if I enjoy talking to you as much as I do. There's a lot of people who are my age. There's a lot of people who are from the South. Mm-hmm. But you said when we were just kind of sitting down in here, you made some comment about somebody frogging somebody, and that just and I went, is that a Southern thing, or is that? I wonder if there's two old Yankee guys sitting up there saying, if somebody said, "I'm frog you," if they know what you're talking about. And then you asked Matt.
Yep. Poor Matt.
Poor Matt, who doesn't know who the Osmonds were.
Oh my gosh.
No. And, you ask him, do you know what I would mean if I said I'm going to frog you an arm? And Matt said, no. And so maybe that's a generational thing, but.
Could be, and it could be a little of both, but you do kind of wonder, like, are there some teenagers sitting in ice fishing shacks this morning, like, trying to frog each other through their overly stuffed jackets?
Yeah.
I suspect, I think frogging is a generational term.
Probably.
There are probably people watching right now going, what are they talking about? And so if we'll get Matt in here, you can frog him on the right arm and I'll frog him on the left arm, right?
There you go. There we go. So how is the new book doing?
Oh, it's great. In fact, we did a first print production run. Of course, you know more about books than most anybody, but we did a first print production run, and we have less than 1,000 left in inventory, so it's almost completely sold out.
I love the way it looks. And so tell me, we'll put it on the show notes, but how do people get it?
Yeah, they can go to shepherdingbook.com.
Shepherdingbook.com.
And order it online. That's the easiest way and the quickest way. And it's the fourth book in a series, but it is a standalone book. People ask me all the time, do you have to read them all together? You don't. This book is telling by itself. This book has a little bit of a theme to it. I always write about parenting and parenting in the great outdoors, but I really write about, I'm always kind of the butt of my own jokes.
Sure.
I tell my audience all the time, I am not a parenting expert. If anything, I am an expert at making the wrong decisions. And so I oftentimes write about the stories where I made those wrong decisions. And it's good that we can laugh. People can read it and they can laugh at my stupidity and at the mistakes I made. But what I know is that there are, especially dads out there who are thinking, I've done that same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I hope that maybe younger dads are a little bit encouraged by, hey, if this guy can do it, so can I. And because and you see this too, you're an outdoors guy. The screen, the phone screen, the computer screen, the iPad screen, it is consuming the minds of our children. And so I just at a very young age, and there's a long and complicated story behind it, but when my girls were young, I just made a determined effort to get them outside and start forcing them. I always called it low tech or no tech. If you get remote enough, they're in a cell phone signal. And,
right.
And so you force them not only to kind of engage nature, but it also forces them to engage you.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest motivator was I found myself, I have these 3 girls, and I found myself trying to figure out how to compete with the likes of Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter, and I realized, hey, if I can just get them, and our girls didn't get phones until they were 15, but that stuff kind of permeates every aspect of life anyway.
Right.
And so I thought, if I can just get them far enough removed from all that, it'll just be me and them.
My boys are 22 and 25 now. And they did not get their phones until they were 14, I think. And, of course, that was a continuing conversation at the time, right?
It starts at about
everybody else has them,
Right.
But
I'm the only one, Dad.
But not too long ago, they got into a conversation in front of Polly and me and thanked us for not allowing them to have phones that early. And they said, we're doing that with our kids. Mm-hmm. I'm like, really? And so it's, I was at the hunting camp this weekend, and I just made the comment. I was listening to an 83-year-old guy talk about something, and then he Googled it, and I turned to everybody else, and I said, these elderly people and their social media, it's ruining their generation.
What's pretty astounding is to think about what they've seen in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. the advent. Some of them, So my mom is 82. She was born in 1940. No, she might be 83. She was born in 1941. And so she doesn't remember the bombing of Pearl Harbor, but she was born in that same year. And she has seen the space race, putting a man on the moon, the microwave oven, television, then color television, then the internet, and now the whole world is, in the palm of your hands. And you just think about how much of a transition that is. It's pretty astounding to think about.
It really is. And to think about how much the world has changed in 100 years, it's like changed more than it changed in the previous 1,000.
Yeah, and populated too.
Yeah.
In the last 100 years, we've added 7 billion people to the planet.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. You know what's scary for me professionally, speaking of technology, is video manipulation. Now you see, my mother-in-law, God bless her, and I love her, and I do. She occasionally will say, "Well, did you see what the president did today?" And I say, "Well, no, I didn't. What did the president do?" And it'll be like, well, he sent a crew to Mars. And I'm like, I'm not 100% sure I'm up to date on current events, but I'm pretty sure we haven't launched a ship to Mars yet. Well, I saw it on the internet.
And he said it.
And he said it. That's right. And so then she'll show me the video, and sure enough, there's Joe Biden, just as plain as day, talking about sending a school bus full of kids to Mars, or whatever the case was.
Right.
And so professionally, that scares me. I remember years ago, there was a lawyer in town. He was a seedy lawyer. Everybody knew he was shady. Nobody trusted him. And you just knew when he was talking, he was lying. And he introduced into a trial a videotaped deposition of an expert witness. And we watched the video, and I knew I had seen the video before, but I kept telling myself something's not right, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So me and I worked for the district attorney at the time. I was a young lawyer. We went back and we were talking through it, and I said, "I think he's edited it." And so we went back and pulled the original video. We had one of the secretaries sit down while we were in the trial, and she's watching she'd watch a minute of the one we had and a minute of the one he just introduced, and she finally found where he had edited all of the stuff together. Well, once it clicked, hey, he's edited, you could see it. Like, it became much more apparent once you knew that was what happened. But today, you can watch that video of Joe Biden talking about sending kids to Mars, and it looks real, even though it's not. And so professionally, that worries me. I had somebody ask me the other day about it, and it's probably one of the most pressing issues that's facing the legal system today.
I would imagine, because even I thought several times during the last election, there's, as people talk to each other about politics, and somebody will say, "Well, so-and-so said so-and-so." And he goes, "What? No, look, here's the video." In the past, you could go, "Here's the video of it." So, well, if I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't believe it.
Right.
And they say seeing is believing. Not anymore.
No, not anymore. Now you got to question the source, right? And question the authenticity of it.
So who have you been putting in prison lately?
Yeah, nobody with video, thankfully.
Yeah.
But I do put quite a few people in prison. We did. Let's see. Here's a case that I thought you would appreciate. So,
I love this stuff.
I know.
I just love this stuff.
So it starts out as a particularly mundane story. There's nothing really exhilarating about it. It's a random guy who's probably impaired or inebriated on some different recipe of intoxicants, and he's just making his way from house to house in a neighborhood, and he's really not even acting all that alarming. His demeanor is not necessarily violent or aggressive. He's pretty casual and pretty happy-go-lucky and jolly. And the only thing that really drew anybody's attention to him is he would knock on the door and he would introduce himself and tell people he had just moved into the neighborhood and just wanted to come by and say hello. The only reason that people even noticed him was that he was absolutely butt naked the whole time. And so he made his way from house to house.
This is small town Alabama.
That's right, yes. He made his way from house to house, just introducing himself as their new neighbor. And I just shudder to think about the reactions that were going on in the houses. And so, of course, somebody calls the police, and the police come, and then, the race is on, and here comes Pride down the backstretch. Well, he went from his casual, happy-go-lucky demeanor to Usain Bolt. And listen, I got the mispleasure, the unfortunate obligation of seeing the body cam video of the chase. And I'm reminded of a television show where there was an episode about a woman trying to open a jar of pickles in the nude, and how there's just some things you don't want to see somebody do naked. And not that I particularly want to see any man naked, but I sure don't want to see a man naked running in a dead sprint from the police, right?
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, as they wrestled him to the ground, that it was kind of like
the police are going, "You get him."
Right,
no,
that's right.
You get him.
Yeah, they're like rock, paper, scissors over who's going. So as they wrestle him to the ground, there is an unfortunate moment where there's two or three of them that have piled on him. Well, I can't remember which officer it was. He deserves a medal for this. But somebody had to secure his legs, and somehow he ends up basically with his face right next to this guy's butt. And it's captured on body camera.
Oh, no.
And so, but the story only gets better from there. So
you've already described something that's going to be in every holiday party video for the rest of this guy's life.
Yeah, that's right. So we're in court, and we're trying the case, and his lawyer.
Now, what is he accused of?
He happened to be on felony probation.
Oh, okay.
And so we were violating his probation because he was arrested for indecent exposure. And so his lawyer, and what I thought was, it was a touch of insanity and a touch of brilliance all at the same time. She argued, very eloquently, I might add, that what he had done was no different than Michelangelo's depiction of David, and that we have made the art of nudity a crime in Alabama. And I thought, you know what? I guess if there was a way to defend this case, that was probably it.
That's probably it. You're not going to get in there, but that's probably it.
Fortunately, the judge saw through it, and that gentleman found his way to the county jail for a little while, and probably the neighbors were all thankful for it. In the meantime, I think his landlord evicted him, and everybody was really happy.
Everybody was happy, yeah. Oh, my gosh. You told me about some guy. Now, I'm not saying this right. I'm not saying this respectfully, but you told me about some guy that just wouldn't die.
Yeah. So his name's Bruce Nelson, and I say that in homage. Like, I have the greatest respect for Bruce Nelson. And I knew him. I had met him a time or two. He was a mechanic there in town, and just a generally kind of a nice guy. You know, he was one of those guys. He never had much, but if Bruce liked you, if you were his friend, he would give you whatever he had to try to help you out. And Bruce took a fella in who was sort of he wasn't necessarily transient, but he was more nomadic. He would move into town and he'd stay for 6 months and piddle and work, and then he'd move somewhere else for 6 months, and then he'd move back. And Bruce had kind of taken him in. They worked together at the shop, and he had kind of taken him in. Well, I guess we speculate, we theorize that he had asked Bruce to borrow some money, and Bruce, we know that Bruce had $90 in his wallet. But we also know he had a bill that he needed to pay, and so that $90 was pretty important to him because the bill was like $80. And so that night after Bruce went to bed, the offender, he's been convicted, so he's not a suspect, he's an offender. But I try not to say the defendants' names because I don't want to glorify them.
Right.
Okay. I'd prefer, I'll pay homage to a victim all day long. I don't want to glorify a defendant.
I got you.
And so the offender, when it snuck into Bruce's bedroom, and Bruce's wallet was on his bedside table, and we speculate that what happened is he was trying to get the money out of Bruce's wallet, and Bruce probably woke up because there's a little bit of an indication of a tussle right there on the bedside, and then the offender shot Bruce in the forehead with a .22 pistol, and left him presumably dead. Took the $90. Went outside and was smoking a cigarette. And Bruce, unbeknownst to the offender, the bullet did not penetrate the skull, which a .22 is a small caliber bullet, and it's not uncommon for us to see a .22 head wound that doesn't penetrate the skull. And in fact, the autopsy revealed the bullet went in somewhere here and made its way around the scalp and stopped. Well, would have been a grotesque sight because your head bleeds freely, and would have left a casual observer thinking he's dead. Well, Bruce was just knocked out. And so at some point, Bruce tries to get up. The offender comes back in, hears him, comes back in. There's a tussle again. He shoots him again, and then sets the bedroom on fire. And so now Bruce is shot twice and been set on fire. And the offender goes outside and thinks, well, I've finished this off, but now the house is on fire. So he gets in a vehicle and he leaves. And he calls the fire department. And he waits to make sure that the house is fully involved. And what had happened was when he left the bedroom, he pulled the door shut. And it was relatively airtight, and so it snuffed the fire out. And so a few minutes go by, he realizes, hey, wait, this house ain't burning like it's supposed to. So he goes back. And when he gets back, he finds Bruce outside. Now, Bruce has been shot and set on fire. And he finds Bruce outside smoking a cigarette. We know he was smoking a cigarette because we see where the cigarette dropped in the last altercation. And he runs up behind Bruce, who's we think, blinded at this point, and he stabs him. And the stab wound was the fatal wound. And Bruce Nelson unfortunately died there in his yard. But one of the most resilient stories of resilience that I've ever. It reminds me of that movie. I can't remember the guy's name now. You'll know it. The fella gets attacked by the bear and drags himself through the woods and runs from the Indians, and it's a great story of survival.
Yeah,
Revenant. Yeah, and I just think every time I think of Bruce Nelson, I think, you know what? If anybody that ever had a will to survive, it was him.
Hugh Glass.
Right, that's right. Yeah, that was Hugh Glass. Yeah, and so I always like to tell the story of Bruce Nelson, not from the way of celebrating his death, but from celebrating his will to survive. Right, he truly fought for every last breath, and what a great fighter he was.
And so this guy hopefully is in prison,
and he will die in prison. Yep. We did try that case. He would not admit his responsibility. We did try it, and he was convicted by a jury of his peers and got multiple life sentences for all the offenses he committed along the way.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll make sure he never, if it's up to me, which it's not always up to me, but I'll make sure that he never gets out of prison.
But some of it is up to you.
That's right, yeah. Because
you can keep up with it, and when he comes up for release, you can remind everybody.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'll do too. And I'll even that story that I'm so passionate about that case that even long after I retire, I'll still go to Montgomery and oppose him ever being released from prison. Yeah, yeah. There's something to be said. People, I think people confuse I need a job with I need a purpose. Especially young people. I see my oldest daughter, she's 22. She graduates from Ole Miss this May, and she keeps talking about, I need a job. And I'm trying to tell her, you need a purpose. You need a purpose. And so I share stories like Bruce Nelson, and that wasn't a job to me. It was a purpose. And so that purpose continues even after I don't have the job anymore.
Right.
And so I always try to encourage young people, find your purpose, and the job will happen.
What do you see changing? I think have you watched the television series Fargo?
Yes. Now, so, I'm not a big TV buff, but I have seen a few episodes of Fargo.
Okay. Well, I think that Fargo, the series, has done for small town crime, has put it on an equal footing. Because I think people used to think of big city crime and small town crime. And I mean, the stuff that I hear you talk about is like, dang, this is Andalusia? This is Evergreen?
Yeah. Well, we all like to think that our bubble's the best bubble.
Right.
But the reality is that everywhere you go, there's good and there's evil. And so we just have to embrace the fact that there's always going to be an element of crime and an unsavory element in every community. I think what's important is how the community responds to it. And so,
give me a bad example and a good example of that.
All right. So a bad example would be the judicial assistant that works for my one of my circuit court judges. Her sister was murdered in a metropolitan town in Alabama. I'm not going to call the department out over the open air, but and when she was murdered, there was only one person there. It is really obvious that it's a murder, and it happened 6 months ago, and he's yet to be arrested. Now, I understand that there's a process. I understand more than most that there's a process. But one of the things I see happening now when we talk about bad examples is understaffed and underfunded departments that are simply overrun by the sheer volume of work they have to do. And therefore, it's what's that old saying about, it's better to do one thing really good than a bunch of things poorly. Overstaffed and underfunded, and they can barely do anything at all, right? So that's kind of a bad example of what I see right now. But a good example is, we have a lot of, so my motto is I want to fix the problem. And that sometimes means putting somebody in prison. Obviously, that offender that killed Bruce Nelson, that was fixing the problem. That's what needed to happen, so that's what we did. But sometimes you're talking about addiction, or you're talking about, an economic crisis. You're talking about a newborn baby that the family couldn't afford. You're talking about, I literally had a woman stealing baby food and baby formula. And so is the response, is fixing the problem for her, putting her in prison? No, right? And so something I see in small towns that I think big cities could learn from, I know almost everybody I prosecute. And
Really?
I do. And I know, because our county is only 36,000 people. I have 36,000 people in my circuit. So
that's something that I would have never even considered. Mm-hmm. Because, you watch this on TV, and it's like, but everybody you prosecute?
Just, if I don't know them personally, I know their mom and their daddy, or I know their brother, or I know I can connect the dots to them. And so when they tell me, for example, he's really a good boy, then I either know, well, no, he really ain't, or, well, he is a pretty good boy, and let's see if we can get this straightened out. And so something talking about Fargo and talking about small town crime and punishment. The beauty of small town justice is gone are the days, for the most part, of the good old boy system. The beauty now of small town justice is we really can fix the problem because we really do know the people we deal with pretty well. And so when somebody, I had a young lady a month or two ago who she had been sitting for an elderly woman. By the way, folks out there in internet land, be really careful who you invite into your home or into your parents' home to take care of them and look after them. And she'd gotten a hold of her checkbook, and she had forged a bunch of checks. And she was pretty smart about it. She had forged them at the grocery store and at the gas station. And so you wouldn't immediately be able to identify that it wasn't in care for the elderly woman. Well, our jurisdiction's small enough that I had dealt with her one time before, several years back, and she had stolen from her employer. And her employer refused to press charges, but the employer had confided in me what had happened and wanted a little advice. And so I knew, I had that to draw back on, so I knew this wasn't a situation where she's an innocent kind of maid. This first time you you're now repeating your bad decisions, right?
Yeah. Wow.
So
what do you see? Like I hear, like I saw an article recently about the most powerful gangs in each state.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really think of Alabama as having gangs. Mm-hmm. But what do you see?
Yeah, we do. We do, and even small town Alabama.
And so this is not just like a bunch of high school seniors that have gone bad and are smoking pot and bullying somebody.
Yeah, what was that? That's a classic movie that all of those great actors got their start in, where they had the greasers and the
Oh yeah, the
God, they found
West Side Story.
Yeah, that was not the one I was thinking of. That's a good example. Yeah, the Outsiders. Yes. So we still do have the outsiders, right? We still do have the high school kids who are wannabe, tough guys that really aren't. What we don't have anymore is kids who just want to fight. We have a lot of kids who their default is sheer acts of just intense violence, and so.
To what do you attribute that?
I mean, I realize I will
Fargo?
I will bring down the wrath of the internet gods when I say this, but I think it is a desensitization to the value of human life and an overexposure to violence through video games and through, let's just call it media, be it television,
right,
or internet, or whatever. I mean, look, if you raise a kid to think that their response to getting angry and somebody doing you wrong is to shoot them, eventually they're going to shoot somebody that does them wrong. And parents, too often today, will let the television or the computer babysit their children. And that's the worst form of babysitter, because you have no idea what the morals are that are being imposed upon your kids.
Right.
And so we do see gang activity in Covington County, not a lot. Usually our gang activity comes out of Montgomery, sometimes out of Troy or Dothan. One of the things I see that's really unusual now, so one of the things we had was a murder for hire, where 5 individuals were hired. Excuse me, I should correct myself. There were 2 individuals that hired 3 more individuals to help them to kill somebody. And so we see young people, especially with gang affiliations, who are committing these incredibly violent crimes in mass. And so I have a 9-person robbery case that's pending right now. And obviously I don't want to talk too much about pending cases.
Sure.
But, and we had this 5-person murder. I have another 4-person murder case. And so young people today, for some reason, when they decide they're going to do something, they go round up as many friends as they can and get them all to engage in the stupid act with them. And the really unfortunate thing is that at least in Alabama, and really in most states around the country, if you participate at any level in the murder, you are considered to have committed the whole. And so you're held, you're charged with the same charges, and you're held to a very similar standard.
You're driving the car, you might as well have pulled the trigger.
That's right, yeah. Because but for you driving the car, it never would have happened. Yeah, exactly. So we do see some gang activity, but not a lot. But are there gangs in Alabama? Sure there are. And anybody who's in their bubble thinking, oh, we don't have that problem here, it's just because you're not sticking your head out of the bubble to see it.
Yeah.
What we do, what really concerns me now are the influx of gangs across the southern border. And the drug trade that comes with it is pretty prolific. We see those cartel gang affiliations more and more now, more than we want to, really. And of course, where I see them are usually they're low. I deal with the lower end of the spectrum as far as the gang hierarchy, but if the low end of the totem pole is here, that's because the top end of the totem pole sent him here.
Wow.
But still the greatest place to live. I tell people all the time, because of course you're like me. We both have exposure. I need to qualify my remarks. My exposure is this compared to yours, which is, but I talk to people all over the country, and of course I do a lot of speaking around the Southeast, and I still tell people, hey, look, Alabama, it's like Jed Clampett. They said California is the place you ought to be. Well, I think Alabama is the place you ought to be, and I tell people all the time, come here, and you'll love it. You won't ever go back home. But what I do caution them about, talking about those two Yankees that don't know what frogging each other means, I remind them there's a reason why you left wherever you left.
Right. Don't come tell us how you had it back home.
That's right. And don't
you left there.
That's right. And you came here for a reason too.
Yeah, we see that particularly in Orange Beach.
Yeah. I guess I didn't think about the fact that you're probably in a saturated market, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we see that particularly in Orange Beach, that, and it's a snowbird thing a lot of times. I mean, it's happened every winter for years, them telling us how they do it back home. And my joke about snowbirds is that they're misguided sometimes, but they're very smart. Right. Because you got to be smart to figure a 3% tip in your head like that.
I don't know who is running the servers union. I don't mean server like computer server. I mean waiters and waitresses. Mm-hmm. But I think that what's happened there's been a revolution in the serving industry in the last 5 years, because somehow whoever runs that union convinced every computer manufacturer in the world to start the tip calculations at 15%, and now they go up to 25%.
Yeah.
And, human nature is, and maybe it's just me, but even if I get bad service, I'm like, well, 15% is the lowest one. I feel like just an utter jerk if I go lower than 15%. And
right.
They have certainly managed a great coup d'etat there.
But I'll tell you this. I mean, it drives me nuts when I buy a candy bar at the convenience store and it says, would you like to add a tip?
Yes.
No, I would not.
That's right. No. Yeah. Or at a buffet.
At a buffet.
I fixed it myself.
Yeah.
Tip me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. One last question, just to prove you're the most interesting person in the world. And I'm just going to give you a topic.
All
right. And so this is just a topic. I just want to see what you think about this topic and just hear your thoughts on the topic. The NIL in college football.
It is the death of all things good in America.
I think so too. That's why we get along.
You know what? I have, of course, I was raised an Auburn fan, and I have long been
I've never
Auburn
held
fan.
that against you, though.
I appreciate that. I do. But I'm not one of those. I don't hate Alabama. I really don't. I celebrate Nick Saban as the greatest coach in college football, and I think that he did something for the student athlete that most coaches could never do. And he really gave them an opportunity to go and have a career with character. And he got out. And I don't know Nick Saban. I've never talked to him personally, but I have read enough of the things that he said to know that the reason he got out was because he knew that the NIL really eliminates the coach's opportunity to promote character among his players. And we see it now. It's a bidding war. And I think the only solution is for the federal government, for Congress to step in and enact laws that restrict some of what's going on. And there are those who would say, well, it's not fair to the players and the colleges are making all that money. Well, you know what? I think the colleges are taking a gamble, taking a risk on whether or not they can develop the talent from an 18-year-old kid. And if there's anything I do know in this world is that most 18-year-old kids are undependable and unreliable. And so I think a full scholarship and a little bit of a paycheck is probably a good idea. I don't think that these, now we have college players who are saying, I'm going into the portal just to see how much money they can get. And that's not about character development. That's just about, advancing, promoting the God that is the almighty dollar. And I don't think that's a good thing.
It's curious to me that, and I don't think it was Herschel Walker, but it was around that time. It's curious to me that there was a time where college football players sued the NCAA to allow them to go to the pros so they could make money. Mm-hmm. And then this year we had Diego Pavia suing the NCAA to allow him to stay in college because
So
he knew he could
money.
make more money.
Yeah.
And Carson Beck, Georgia, he's not going to the NFL.
Right.
He's been a starter for Georgia for 2 or 3 years and the face of Georgia football. He's going to Miami.
Yep.
He's going to Miami for $4 million.
Yep.
Now you think, oh, why is he staying in school? Well, there you go. Because
That's right.
Bryce Young a couple of years ago was the number 1 draft pick in the entire draft. In his first year, he got that minimum $1 million.
That's right.
And so Carson Beck, and in case you need to do the math on that, that means you're watching a college football game where in a 12 game season, you're going to be watching a college football game where the quarterback is making $330,000 a game.
Yep. And what better example of the gluttony and excess that is our culture today than that, right? We are willing to take money. It's interesting we're ending with this topic because we started out talking about Wisdom Harbor and how Wisdom Harbor offers such a decisive advantage to young people to grow in their knowledge and their intellect and their understanding. And here we are talking about diverting college funds. I know people are going to say, well, they get big donors that pay this $4 million. Well, that big donor, that's $4 million he's not going to give to the College of Business.
Right.
And so we're diverting funds away from the pursuit of education just to create a spectacle of football. And it reminds me of gladiators in the Roman Colosseum.
We are Rome.
We celebrate the victor no matter the cost. And I fear where that will lead us. Kobe Bryant once said, by the way, I don't know if you may not know this about me. I played 1 year of basketball in the 6th grade at Christ the King Middle School, and I got 6 rebounds that year. And so I wanted to start with my basketball qualifications.
Right. Okay. All right.
Kobe Bryant once said that if somebody asked him what separates you from the rest of the NBA, and he said 20 minutes a day. He said, I will practice 20 minutes longer than everybody else. And so I have this thing that I often say to my girls, and I say to myself, 20 minutes. That's all it takes, 20 minutes. Statistics show that if you'll read 20 minutes a day as a child, your ACT scores and your SAT scores will be remarkably higher than all of the peers who don't read 20 minutes a day. Statistics show and studies show that if you'll study a foreign language for 20 minutes a day, by the end of a year's time, you'll have a quite fluent verbal ability to speak that language. And so 20 minutes a day. And we're putting $4 million into one player. And I wonder what the entire payroll for the University of Miami is now for the Mighty Canes, who haven't won a national championship since the 90s and really haven't been very competitive since the 90s. But instead, we could put all that money into 20 minutes a day. And we wonder why, Andy, our high school kids, even in the state of Alabama, I know Orange Beach High School has a great reputation. Gulf Shores High School has a great reputation. But even here, we see our high school kids coming out of high school not prepared for college.
Right.
And it's because we emphasize the wrong 20 minutes a day. We want them practicing football. It's a win at all costs. We play travel ball on Sunday instead of going to church. We skip, family dinners because we're going to go to the batting cage every night. And so we emphasize the wrong 20 minutes a day. You know what I think Kobe Bryant, well, let me just set the internet on fire first. Michael Jordan's the best NBA player ever, right. Okay? Kobe Bryant's probably the 3rd best. And that 20 minutes a day had value in his life. But I think the lesson is far greater than that. Let's quit putting the focus on NIL money. Let's quit putting the focus on the game. And let's start putting the focus on real life. Because that's really what matters. What is it? 1% of all kids who play high school baseball are going to play professional baseball somewhere.
Right.
And so the other 99%, I'm not saying they shouldn't have played ball, but it was a game.
It was a game.
Right. And there was a life to live outside of that game.
Buddy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
As always. I mean, I could do this again next week. I really...
You know what? I always enjoy being here. You're it's important, I think, for people to be real, and you're one of the realest personalities there are, and I'm glad that people tune in and pay attention to what you have to say.
Thank you very much. And I would like to offer you a specific honor as we close this show.
I'm intrigued.
I've never had anybody do this before, but I'll close the show. And then, as you know, we always have a fake commercial at the end.
I wondered why I always went to those websites and I never could order anything.
Could find them, yeah. Well, I would like you to handle
I would be honored.
The commercial.
I would do that, and I would brag about it for weeks on end.
You will have been the only person ever.
That is fantastic.
All right. Well, here we go. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you. Seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Fried squirrels for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills.
Additional financial consideration provided by questionablefoods.com. Friends, do you ever wonder about the actual source of some of the world's most popular foods? Names can be deceiving, and while we actually ship these foods to the address of your choice, here at questionablefoods.com, we are also a source of culinary education. For centuries, chefs have conspired to conceal what they really are preparing by giving the entree a palatable name. For instance, the British dish Bubble and Squeak is nothing more than leftover vegetables mixed together and fried. The name comes from the sound the foul mixture makes in the pan. Sweetbread sounds delicious, but before you order from questionablefoods.com, just know that sweetbreads are in fact offal, specifically the thymus and pancreas glands of calves and lambs. Rocky Mountain oysters, those are bull testicles. Head cheese, suffices to say, the head meat of the hog is present, but no cheese is involved. And hot dogs, do you really want to know? But if you found out, you'd wish it was dog meat. We are questionablefoods.com. For every $50 order, we will include a bottle of our newest product, Aunt Edna's Molasses. It's from an old family recipe, and it's really good. Though at questionablefoods.com, we have questions of our own. Like, does Aunt Edna trap them or raise them in a pen? And what does she do with the rest of the moles? questionablefoods.com.